But that you have those were the two big talking points, of course, coming through the weekend. That the Sepang Racing team will be rebranded as RNF Racing, and that's expected to go through till 2026. And then just coming back as well to Michael Laverty's new team as well, the Vision Track Honda Racing team is going to field Scott Ogden and Josh Waitley as well. So that's two young Brits coming through there. So it'd be great to monitor their progress. Now, we've talked obviously a lot about Dovi there in the last few moments. So let's focus on them, shall we? And Morbidelli as well. Coming back after injury, returning after a while off as well. Where did Morbidelli finish? Well, it was 18th for Morbidelli, and then for Dovizioso 21st. But Keith, how did you rate their performances on their return to the top flight?
Exactly as I would have expected. Morbidelli is stiff as a board. He's got control problems. It's a difficult racetrack. It's got ripples on it. It's got flat corners. You got, the opportunities to make a mistake around somewhere like Misano are huge. So I think Morbidelli's easy way. I think the way that I would be looking at it if I was Franco this year is you work your way back to your peak again through what's left. We've got 4 rounds left. He's aiming towards that. And I think it's exactly the same thing with Dovi. I think Dovi's got 4 rounds to play around effectively to get things in place for the coming year, 2022. I think that's what they're both working towards. No criticism of Dovi at all. I know I really just gave him one by, aligning him with Dixon. But, this is a competitive sport. Nobody leaves anything on the table here. So be interesting to hear what he had to say after his first race. I saw nothing of him and I heard nothing afterwards about him particularly. We just know his race position and his race times. He was a second and a half off the pace compared to Bagnaia, who is bang on the pace. So it's a tricky one to make comparisons, and I'm reluctant to do that in the circumstances because it's his first weekend back, effectively. And it wasn't a full-on Friday that he had either to get to it. Dovizioso is a clever man. He's massively experienced. He's not going to make the mistake of throwing it at the fence at the first weekend. He's going to be collecting data, both in his head and physically. So I'm looking forward to where that goes from there. Morbidelli, like I say, stiff as a board still. First time back. The injury was a lot more serious than I gave it credit for at the beginning. I think, and I think a lot of people thought that he would be back quicker than he was and that it wasn't as serious an injury as it is. So give him a chance, do a bit of recuperation on the bike. They're not exactly easy things to ride, Harry. They're quite tricky.
Really? I reckon I could just hop on. It'd be fine. I'll be up there, top 10, surely.
Do you know what? The daft thing about it is you could ride one. They're the easiest things in the world to ride in comparison to how they would have been in the old days when you've got a 4-inch wheel with 2,500 RPM power band and then all of a sudden it tries to throw you to the moon. These things, if you ride them gently, they're easy.
You're right, yeah. Well, people can get trackside at some point. You've got to let me have a go.
Well, look at Lewis. I know Lewis Hamilton. I'm comparing you with Lewis Hamilton, which probably is a bit unfair on him. But Lewis Hamilton can ride a motorbike really, really well. I mean, he can ride a motorbike really, really well. Bikes nowadays, they've got much wider power bands on them. They're quite sophisticated things to ride. They don't want to tear your head off as soon as you get on them. But, of course, if you want that last 5%, then it's going to tear your head off.
Wow, compared to Lewis Hamilton, I never thought I'd see the day. And if you haven't seen that bloody documentary with Rossi as well, every other day on Sky Sports F1, filling the gaps, then I don't know.
The switch.
The switch. That's it. It's great. I've seen it about 20 times now, but it's great.
Well, while we're doing film promos, Harry, and I know you've got something else you want to get us towards. I watched a film, The Missile from the East. It was made in 2020, and it's about Ernst Degner. Degner, we got Degner Curve, if you remember, there is one called like that out at East German racetrack. And he was the East German guy from MZ who defected. Now, Matt Oxley's got a book called Stealing Speed. It's about stealing speed because Ernst Degner defected to the West, went to Suzuki and gave MZ's secrets to Suzuki. In a nutshell, that's what it's about. But there's a film out called The Missile from the East. And it was I think it was 10 to 3 in the morning, the other morning. I noticed it. It's brilliant. Wow. So anybody out there that's not seen it yet, who's read Matt's book, I mean, better if you read Matt's book and understand the detail behind the defection and all the other bits and pieces as well. Stealing Speed is Matt's book. But this was, and it's got Murray Walker in it, Tommy Robb, Frank Paris's missus, Ernst Degner's son. I mean, we've got the right people speaking about it. I was captivated. It was one of them things where, to start with, none of us, even me, because I ain't even this old, you can't appreciate how difficult things were back in the days of when they instigated the Berlin Wall, when they first put the wires across and split Berlin through the middle, and Degner and his family were on one side of it. And we actually had him racing in a world championship, Ernst Degner, and leading the world championship. And he very nearly won the race that he was going to defect from, but he had a failure on the bike. Anyway, look, I'm not going to ruin it for you, everybody. But it was called The Missile from the East. It was made in 2020, so it's an up-to-date film, and it is really good. So there you go. That's my recommendation for your for checking it out. It was on Sky Documentaries.
Okay. Maybe we should make that a weekly thing. Keith's weekly movie, motorsport movie recommendation. That could.
I've got loads of them, and most people have never heard of half the things I watch.
Oh, they get The Missile from the East. All right, write that one down, folks. Now, I want to go back though to some of the on-track action, if I may be so bold. I want to talk about Marc Marquez in fourth at a track that we knew that was going to be hard on him. Lots of right-hand corners and turns. Always going to be a strain, but he was really pleased with fourth, wasn't he? And it was a good ride for him. But especially as he was always going to be limited at this kind of track.
Tough little shit. That's about as much as I've got to say about it. Frank, in fact, I think Valentino Rossi called him something much stronger, but along those lines. I mean, when you saw the pain he was going through the early parts of the weekend, and he had a couple of crashes. I mean, the one down on the right-hand side that he would have saved with that shoulder in better days when he was in a better condition. But he was suffering with pain, and it showed, which is really, really unusual for Marquez to show pain. Very, very impressive with that position. Very impressive. And if it hadn't been for the likes of Bastianini, who was riding out of his socks, it'd have been even better. It's a situation where, no one gives any quarter in this. Oh, so you're in pain, are you, Mark? Well, bad luck. Oof, move out of the way. Through comes Bastianini. No, it was a very, very good ride. Texas, everyone says, Texas, he's been an absolute king of bloody Austin. But that is a hard track. He's going to have to work really hard there. He's going to be in trouble in Texas as well. This is, for me, Marquez is not going to be himself this year. He's just working towards 2022. And he's gradually going to get better. He's a different Marquez. He's come back as a different Marquez. He's not the same guy he was before he broke his arm.
He's clearly in pain, isn't he? It was interesting. Dovizioso on Thursday had a sort of a special press conference, as they seem to organise when the big stars come back, and he was asked about Marquez, and he said, in his opinion, he's in more pain than he's kind of letting on, and of course it was back-to-back race weekends, and we saw how much effort he put in at Aragon in those closing laps to try and beat Bagnaia, and then just 5 days later he's back on the bike at Misano. He's been saying, the track is very compressed. It's not a classic flowing track by any means. So he's muscling the bike from right to left all the time. And it looked like hard work, didn't it? And it's a right-hand track. As he said he was happier with the result than he was at Aragon, finishing second because it's a right-hand track. He was happy to be the top Honda. But he said, look, I want to be winning races. I want to be fighting for the title next year. And they got a lot of work to do. He said they're still losing a lot on the exit of the corners, he said, and it's kind of like it snowballs from there. Because they're losing out on the exit, they then have to brake really late at the next corner to try and make the time back. And then they're pushing things too hard. And I mean, he's fallen, is it 20 times this year already? I think he tops the fallers list, and he didn't even take part in the first two rounds. So, and I mean, given that he's in this pain, to be falling so much, I mean, it's the last thing you want to do, isn't it? Because you're going to end up knocking that shoulder again, aren't you? Eventually, just the odds of probability.
If Marc Marquez had fallen off every time he should have fallen off, he'd have topped the falls list for the last 3 or 4 years. Because he saved half of the ones that most people would have slung at the road. So I think the fact that he's falling down now is probably how most of us would feel in the circumstances. Yeah, okay, I fell off it again. But Marquez usually saves half of them. That's the bit that's sort of the smoke and mirrors regarding Marquez and his wonderful saves.
It's
Yeah, and that's the whole thing about the shoulder, isn't it? That he can't save them now, can he? Not in the right handers. I think until we see Marc do those saves, that's when we know he's back to the old Marc, isn't it? When we see him picking it up on the right-hand side. We're not seeing it at all, are we, this year? And as he says, I think it's going to be next year before we see it happen. Big test for them coming up. Misano, obviously, big test for everyone, but I think especially Honda. A lot of work to do for 2022. You'd imagine there's going to be some new engines because they've thrown so many chassis at the bike, and they haven't made a consistent step. They've had things that will work at one track. They think great. They take it to another track, a different character of track, and it doesn't work. So I think it's more and more clear it's going to be a complete bike overhaul that they need. And I think they're going to be. Well, Stefan Bradl was on track this weekend, wasn't he? I think almost to work for the test, like a pre-test almost, wasn't it? And that shows how important it is. I think I heard there's a lot of extra engineers were at the track for Honda as well this weekend. So 2 big days coming up for them.
Bradl's re-signed for them as well as a test rider. Today that was announced. So Bradl has been doing a really good job. I mean, he was there or thereabouts during the whole weekend, wasn't he?
Finished ahead of Alex Marquez as well. And the second highest Honda was Taka Nakagami in 10th. So Marquez really driving out his socks this weekend. And I know we have talked about this, on and off throughout the whole year, but, you can't not. It's a huge talking point, Marc Marquez's injury. And actually, Baber Mughal, I hope I pronounced that right, has asked Keith, in your racing experience, have you ever heard of a rider's problems lingering on for as long as Marc's have? And is it getting better just by racing? Because although Marc is getting race fit, his shoulder doesn't seem to be getting any better since Portimao, really.
Most riders, top line riders, have got injuries that are causing them a problem. You just don't see or hear about them. It's a situation where most of us have had lingering injury that create a different way of riding the motorcycle in some way, shape or form. It presents itself in a different way at different racetracks. Back injuries. Mine was always back injury, shoulder injury as well. And I think that most top line riders will have had that. But Marc Marquez's injury is a very serious injury. He already had problems with his shoulders anyway. He'd had to have them tightened up. I can't remember what the technical term is, where all the ligaments had to be so that it didn't drop out. His arm would drop out of its socket. His shoulder would drop out of its socket just to pat him on the back or loosely. I used to be able to do it, actually. I used to be able to drop my arm out of the socket. And because the ligaments and everything around it are holding it in. And he's had all that lot tightened up. He's had some major surgery in an area. Your shoulder is the most complex piece of mechanical equipment you've got in your body. It goes through all that movement everywhere you want to go. Your shoulder, you imagine it. Just sometimes you should think about it, what your body goes through, what you can do with certain parts of your body. And your shoulder is remarkable. And it's got all that strength. It can support all that, everything it has to do. Multiply that by God knows how much when it comes to what Marquez is expecting his shoulders to do most of the time, picking up motorbikes at 100 mile an hour off your knee and your shoulder, going through the kind of crashes he's gone through, now through the kind of surgeries that he has gone through in recent years as well. Don't know. It's going to be one of those ones where, yes, of course, I know riders that have gone through lingering injuries, but Marc's injury is career-ending in most circumstances. And at this point, except his, it would seem. But the ultimate test, which I hope is not coming, could be just around the corner. You never really, really can be sure what type of accident or how you're going to get caught up in a motorbike or somebody else's motorbike or whatever it might be. And that at the end of the day, he's broken. His arm has been broken badly. His ligaments, his shoulders have not been in good order for some time. So the wrong type of accident could finish his career next week in the, COTA, Circuit of the Americas, when that's coming up in a few weeks' time. So, fingers crossed, he'll come back in 2022. He's building his strength up. I think his mechanical strength is there. I think that seems to be okay. But, he's been nursing that injury for some time, and soft tissue and so on, muscle, it takes time to build it back up to the level that he has. I don't know, Pete, whether he's got the full movement that he had before or whether it's just the strength. I would suspect that he's not got quite the full movement that he would have had before. Most of us that have had shoulder injuries can't move our shoulder, that the offending shoulder, anything like the other one, for instance. This one, I can go anywhere you like on it, but this one I can get to about here, and then it won't rotate any higher. And I've not had a serious shoulder injury, so I can't imagine what it must be like for the likes of Marquez going through these. It was his arm that broke seriously. That was his major problem, but his shoulder has taken the brunt of it as well. So I think it's not just about the bone that was broken. I'm sure that's mechanically fixed. I'm sure that has got the strength it needs to have, but it's all the soft tissue stuff that's making it, all the movement and all the exercise that he's now got to do. Don't know. Be interesting. Don't go slamming no patio doors, Mark. It's not good for you.
He did say, didn't he, just before this weekend, he sort of admitted that he is in pain. And that's something really rare. I think it was Dovizioso once said about Marquez, he said, look, there's some riders that, if they get hurt, they're carrying an injury, they play it up a bit, and Mark is the opposite. Mark, he hides how much pain he's in. And we've seen that previously, haven't we, where he's dislocated his shoulder and then he's come back and he doesn't complain. But you can see him now. The fact that you see him, reaching for the shoulder even, I mean, that's just, it looks like a subtle thing. But when you think that Mark would never show weakness before, would he? Any kind of weakness. And the fact that it is bothering him so much, for such a long time, it must be playing on his mind. He must be thinking, I mean, racers by definition, I'm sure you're one of them, Keith, are pretty short patient. They have a short attention and patience span, shall we say. They want things to work quick, don't they, by nature? And this is an injury that's going on and on and on. Rossi was asked earlier in the weekend, certainly in my career from side about 2000, the biggest shoulder injury I can remember, Rossi had a shoulder injury that lingered on and on. But as Rossi said, that was 6 months. And it seemed like an age, and wow, he's carried this injury for basically a season. But you look at Mark's injury, and this is on another scale, so I have no gauge of an injury that's similar to this, to any idea of what the recovery time is going to be. And as the question says, it's almost like the recovery is plateaued, isn't it? And we're not seeing it. You're not seeing him improving as such. He almost seems to be in more pain now than he was before. Now, is that because he's pushing the shoulder more, and working it more? But either way, I think Mark certainly would have expected to be in a better position by now. I think that's fair to say.
I wonder whether it's the evolution of Marc Marquez that he's prepared to show the pain now. I think it's everybody knows now. There's no deception available anymore. So no point. Might as well just if I'm in pain and I show it a bit, I'm not that bothered about it anymore. Perhaps. And he does evolve, doesn't he, Mark? He is one of these guys that sort of he gets the maximum out of everything himself, the bike, whatever he does, he's always aiming for the maximum. Maybe he's just decided that that's not worth focusing on anymore. Just get on with the job. And if it looks like I'm in pain, well, I am. Maybe.
Well, he was happy with fourth, it looked like, post-race. Now, I'm going to move on to Moto2, but just before we do that, I want to touch on Maverick Vinales and the Aprilia's. Vinales coming home in 13th in the end. Second race on the Aprilia, having just done a lot of testing, of course, at Misano, which he did before he signed, or just as he signed. So you'd think he's got some good experience here, but what did you think of Vinales' second run out in race trim?
Just got to look at his face. He looks happy. He looks younger. Baby now. He's got a lot of things out of the way in the last few weeks, that's for sure. It's him man. And Michael Laverty could compare notes, really, couldn't they, about different things? I mean, Michael Laverty's just had a child. I should have mentioned that. Michael Laverty's just had a child as well with Jodie Lee. So Chaz Davis's sister, who he's married to, they've just had a baby as well. So not only has he been putting a team together, not only has he been working for a broadcaster, not only is he running the Vision Track Academy, he's also a father for the first time as well. And likewise, getting back to the main man that we're talking about, bloody Maverick. I mean, he's got a lot he's had to deal with in the last couple of weeks. I mean, the Yamaha thing, I think, had peaked. I think he'd got to the point where it was the end. He needed that divorce. I'm sure there are people out there that can relate to that. He just needed to be somewhere else. And the fact he looks happy, for me, is a very important thing. The question for me was always going to be, were Aprilia going to be able to nurture the best of Maverick Vinales? Were they going to be able to provide him with what he needs to get on? Right now, it looks really good. Looks like they're having their love affair at the moment. He's divorced from Yamaha. He's found himself a love affair, and he's getting on with it. And he looks happy with it. So I wish him well.
what did he cut off? What was he? 27 seconds, wasn't he, behind at Aragon? I think it was 21 seconds. So he definitely made a clear step. He got a lot closer to Aleix. I think he was 6 seconds behind, wasn't he, on Sunday? So he'd been 18 the week before. So clear step forward. But I think this test will be really important for him coming up again, because he said they haven't really had time to do much with the bike. And as he gets used to it, he could, of course, understands what he needs changed, if that makes sense. And he's always been keeping the bike as it was until now, but he said he's still sort of, there's some areas where he's not too comfortable. He says there's a bit of a lack of stability, especially in the early laps. He needs to do better in qualifying. I mean, he had a great first day, didn't he? Because of course he'd done the private test, and so he had that advantage of the track knowledge, and led the way, and then helped by the rain as well. So perfect start there. But as sort of, I think he knew it was going to happen, as Aleix and others said. The testing time makes a big difference here, and so it's not, if people look at the result and say, how did he go from first on Friday to, 13th on Sunday? That was pretty much expected. That's, the others catch up pretty quickly. But exactly as Keith was saying, he seems a lot happier. He said he feels there's a lot more potential, with this bike to come. He likes the engine power. He likes the grip from the tires and things like that. A lot of the things that he was, let's say, complaining about on the Yamaha. So he needs to get used to the braking still. I think that's one area where he needs to improve. I asked him, what's he going to focus on for this test? Because, of course, is he going to work for next year or this year? And he said basically his plan is to sort of split it 50-50, because he says, he wants to get results this season as well. He doesn't just want to use it as, riding around and getting comfortable. He wants to also, bring the bike to whatever level he can bring it to. But at the same time, the 22 bikes are being built now. So there'll be some important decisions to make at this test coming up. It's the last test during the season. The next one will be after the season ends at the end of November. So it'll be it'll be a big test for him just to get track time as well outside of a Grand Prix weekend. And can he continue this momentum? Can he keep making these steps forward? He's had the first points now. He's closer to Aleix. What will he be doing in Kota?
We'll have to watch and see as ever. Well, at the end of the MotoGP section, it's still Fabio Quartararo with a 48-point lead now, 234 points, with Pecco Bagnaia, 186. Joan Mir down to third, 167, ahead of Zarco, 141, a point ahead of Jack Miller, who has 140. Let's move on to Moto2. It was once again Raul Fernandez who held off teammate Remy Gardner for back-to-back wins and a team 1-2 for the IO pair. Fernandez really showing that the pains he's still experiencing from his injury are not holding him back, with a broken bone in his hand, giving him no bother at all, apparently. It was, though, Sam Lowes who started on pole, but after a mistake cost him the lead, he was still able to keep it on the road and brought it home in fourth place. Aaron Cadet overhauled him for the final spot on the podium. Jake Dixon's returned to Moto2 as well after deputising in MotoGP. He came home in 19th position. It's still Remy Gardner with a 34-point lead now in the standings. Keith, with a broken bone in your hand and still to win 2 races on the trot, it's pretty impressive.